When my mother-in-law was asked if I would be preparing the New Year's meal, her response was immediate, a dramatic wave of her hands, followed by an exaggerated laugh. Absolutely not, impossible. My daughter-in-law can't cook to save her life, she exclaimed, making sure everyone around could hear. She dubbed me the hopeless housewife, incapable of even managing a New Year's feast. With pride, she declared herself the one in charge of the kitchen. Her laughter wasn't just irritating, it was humiliating. I'd endured enough. My name is Natalie, I'm 29, and I married last year. As a full-time housewife, I genuinely enjoy cooking, and my husband, Daniel, is far from picky. He'll eat anything that's edible, and he's kind and understanding. We live in a lovely newly renovated home with a dream kitchen that has a large island. In theory, everything should be perfect, but there's one constant issue: my mother-in-law. She takes immense pride in her cooking skills and views me as a complete failure in the kitchen. And she doesn't keep it to herself, she lets everyone know. Just the other day, I overheard her chatting with the neighbor's wife, making sure her voice was loud enough for me to hear as I hung laundry outside. My daughter-in-law can't even cook properly. It's dreadful. I don't know how she was raised. My poor son, stuck with her, she lamented. Her words hit me like arrows, but hearing her belittle my family, especially my parents, was more than I could bear. I knew I couldn't let this continue. I've always respected my parents, who taught me so much, but my mother-in-law never made the effort to understand or appreciate those lessons. Instead, she opted to criticize. Today was just another episode in her ongoing series of jabs. She doesn't even know how to season anything. If I don't cook, there's no flavor at all. Why did my son marry someone like her? She complained, with the neighbors joining in, suggesting that Daniel must have made a mistake marrying me. They even wondered why she hadn't taught me herself. I clenched my jaw, wishing they would just stop. My grip on a glass tightened, and it cracked in my hand. That evening, when Daniel came home and my mother-in-law was conveniently in the shower, I saw my chance. "Can't you do something about your mom? She's out there spreading rumors about me, saying I can't cook," I said, venting my frustration as I took his jacket. It felt like the only way to get it off my chest. Daniel, though, didn't react the way I expected. He wasn't close to his mother, and he's always been good to me, so I thought he'd defend me, but instead, he seemed confused. "Well, Mom's always been particular about cooking," he said, scratching his head. The word particular felt like a poor excuse for the harsh words I'd been hearing. I bit back a comment about her obsession with overpowering spices, staring at him in disbelief. "She's a good cook, though, right?" he asked, almost too casually. "I don't know about good or bad cooking," I replied, fighting the urge to say more. "Please, just get along with her. Isn't that what a wife is supposed to do?" And with that, he walked out of the room, leaving me stunned. Was he serious? What did he mean by a wife's duty? I was struggling to make sense of his words. A wave of frustration hit me. As much as I hated to admit it, my mother-in-law's cooking wasn't something I enjoyed. She'd taken over the kitchen for the last year, supposedly to spare me from the effort, but her meals were far from enjoyable. She believed that loading up on spices made everything better, and Daniel, raised on that style of cooking, always ate without complaint. For me, though, it felt like a daily battle, trying to finish meals that were not only too spicy but also began to affect my health. Each meal became a silent struggle, forcing down the food, afraid of the consequences if I didn't. When I was alone in our bedroom, I let out a frustrated sigh. The hardest part wasn't her cooking, it was that Daniel didn't seem to care about how I felt. As the New Year's celebration approached, I couldn't shake the dread that settled in my stomach. It would be my first New Year in this family, and it was clear my mother-in-law's feast would be the centerpiece. I wasn't filled with excitement. Instead, I felt the weight of the expectations that came with it, and the overpowering flavors that had become a permanent part of my life. When Daniel casually mentioned that it was customary for the family to gather and enjoy the feast prepared by his mother for New Year's, I couldn't help but silently question the tradition. I wondered if it was the food they truly loved or if they'd just gotten used to it over the years. On the outside, I simply murmured an "oh," trying to mask the mix of uncertainty and resignation that washed over me. Despite the sympathy I felt for the relatives who eagerly attended each year, I couldn't shake the sense of dread that crept in at the thought of another feast prepared by my mother-in-law. Although my mother-in-law often critiqued my cooking, calling it bland, my parents had instilled in me a strong belief in my abilities in the kitchen. I secretly yearned to cook for everyone, to offer up some subtler flavors that might challenge Daniel's usual spicy meals. With newfound determination, I decided it was time to speak up about the New Year's feast. While she moved around the kitchen, pulling out large plates and pots in preparation for the big day, I saw my opportunity. "I'd like to help with the New Year's feast," I said, my voice tentative but firm as I watched her hustle. She paused, turning toward me with a look of immediate dismissal. "Natalie, you can't even cook properly. How could you possibly prepare food for the new year? It's not just our family, there will be all the relatives here. You know that, right?" she responded, her tone dripping with condescension. "But I'm part of this family now. It's my duty as a wife to contribute," I protested, my desperation creeping into my voice. She shook her head dismissively. Do you really want to make things awkward right at the start of the new year? Everyone expects my cooking. We can't disappoint them. Please, understand, and don't interfere. Frustration bubbled inside me as I watched her turn back to her preparations, effectively shutting down my offer with a wave of her hand. The new year arrived, and the house filled with about 20 relatives, more than I had anticipated, many of whom I hadn't seen since the wedding. I greeted each guest warmly, ushering them into the spacious dining room that had once intimidated me when I first moved in. The large room, bustling with chatter and laughter, seemed to come alive, perfectly suited for the gathering. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law was already the center of attention in the kitchen, deep in conversation with the arriving relatives, orchestrating the celebration as if it were entirely her domain. During the festive preparations, a relative, clearly curious, asked, "By the way, is Natalie preparing the feast this year?" Without missing a beat, my mother-in-law waved her hands dismissively and laughed loudly. "Impossible, my daughter-in-law can't cook at all. She's a hopeless housewife who can't even manage a New Year's feast. I'm the one who handles everything around here," she declared, her laughter sharp and cutting. It wasn't a joke, it was a direct, public insult, meant to humiliate me. At that moment, I reached my breaking point. "Mother-in-law, please let me prepare the New Year's feast this time. If it doesn't turn out well, you can always whip up a palate-cleansing dish," I said, trying to break the uncomfortable silence that had settled. After a brief pause, the room began to murmur with whispers from the relatives. "Well, I certainly don't want a disappointing meal, but I guess practice makes perfect, right?" My mother-in-law conceded reluctantly, sensing the shift in the room as some relatives began to side with me. "Fine, if it doesn't work out, Frida can step in," she added, still unwilling to let go entirely. "All right then, Nat, you can take the reins this year," she said with a sigh, her words carrying a reluctant tone. "But remember, I can always step in. Ladies and gentlemen, let's humor this hopeless housewife for once," she announced, her voice dripping with patronization. With my heart swelling with pride and a fierce determination, I was ready to show everyone what I could do. This was my moment to change the narrative. I threw myself into preparing the meal, pouring everything I had into every dish. As I placed the beautifully arranged feast on the large platter, the room buzzed with praise. "Wow, the meal turned out perfectly. It looks amazing. Well done, Natalie. This isn't something just anyone could pull off," they said, their enthusiasm lifting my spirits. Amidst the compliments, my mother-in-law, who had just returned from shopping for the so-called palate-cleansing dish, glanced at my spread. "It looks fine, I suppose, but it's probably bland," she remarked, emphasizing probably, clearly unwilling to acknowledge any success. Ignoring her, I focused on handing out paper plates and forks to the relatives, encouraging them to enjoy the meal. My mother-in-law rushed into the kitchen, eager to start her backup dish. She kept a watchful eye on the proceedings, likely expecting an opportunity to step in. The relatives took tentative bites of my dishes. A murmur of approval began to grow. Unfazed, my mother-in-law chuckled loudly and announced, "See, I told you, this is why she's the incompetent daughter-in-law. You don't have to force yourselves. I'll prepare the palate-cleansing dish right away." Her tone was triumphantly condescending, assuming the meal would be a failure. But her satisfaction quickly faded as the room filled with genuine admiration. "This is the best New Year's food I've ever had. It's like something from a fancy hotel. Natalie, where did you learn to cook like this?" one of the relatives exclaimed, their voice full of awe. The room buzzed with energy as others chimed in with similar praise. In that moment, my mother-in-law stood frozen, stunned into silence by the unexpected approval. With all attention now focused on me, I felt a surge of confidence. It was the perfect time to share my background. "I grew up in a family deeply passionate about food," I began, my voice steady with pride. "My family owns a renowned French restaurant, celebrated for its authentic cuisine and even recognized in the Michelin Guide. My father is the 5th generation overseeing culinary operations, and my mother, from a long line of chefs, supports him wholeheartedly. From a young age, I learned to cook by observing them. By the time I was in upper elementary school, I was already learning to cook alongside them. Although my brother will inherit the restaurant, the culinary knowledge passed down from my parents remains a deep source of pride within me." The revelation shifted the atmosphere completely. The relatives now looked at me with newfound respect, while my mother-in-law stood speechless. The room buzzed with impressed voices, and I felt a deep connection to my culinary roots, finally sharing my true heritage. That's when I realized just how much my mother-in-law's dismissive attitude had hurt me. To her, belittling my cooking was like denying my parents' legacy and the restaurant that had been a cornerstone of our family for generations. I had mentioned this before marriage, but it seemed lost on her. My mother-in-law, with her condescending ways, probably saw me as little more than a girl from a humble countryside restaurant, while Daniel, indifferent to culinary subtleties, likely didn't understand the difference between a family-run business and authentic French cuisine. I often found myself questioning why I married into this family, the thought bubbling up every time she belittled me. I muttered it under my breath, but as I turned, I heard someone call my name, meeting the expectant gazes of several relatives. I heard, "We have seconds, I want more too." Despite the generous portions I'd made, everything had been devoured. A wave of happiness swept over me, and I felt tears welling up. Receiving praise for my cooking should have been second nature to me, something I'd known before getting married, but over the past year, I had almost forgotten that feeling. "Yes, I'll prepare more right away," I said, a newfound sense of determination filling me as I hurried to the kitchen. I passed by my motionless mother-in-law, who, despite her earlier criticisms, had still brought in the ingredients for the meal. "Mother-in-law, I'll use these ingredients, okay?" I called out, but she didn't respond. The groceries sat untouched in the kitchen, her silence hanging in the air. I moved closer to inspect the contents of the bags when I heard a voice behind me. Could you teach us how to cook too?" I turned to find 4 women standing in the doorway, ranging in age from my own to about my mother-in-law's. Their unexpected request sent a surge of warmth through me. This wasn't just a chance to share my skills, it was an opportunity to connect across generations, to bridge the gap between family members through the shared love of cooking. It felt like a chance to validate myself, to show them not just my skills, but the rich culinary tradition I had inherited. Their eyes sparkled with genuine curiosity and admiration. "The food was amazing, we'd love to learn from you," they said, their enthusiasm filling the room. Their words ignited something within me. I'd never thought about teaching cooking before, but in that moment, I realized how much I could offer. With a smile, I agreed to teach them, and the room buzzed with excitement. They chatted eagerly about how they'd impress their husbands by improving their cooking skills, and just like that, an impromptu cooking class was born. From a distance, my mother-in-law watched us, her face unreadable as she silently tidied up the kitchen. As the class came to an end and we served the dishes, they were met with enthusiastic praise. "I have to admit, Grace's cooking can be a bit too salty for me," Jennifer, one of the women, said with a radiant smile, "but Natalie's dishes, they're delicate and refined, like real French cuisine." A wave of pride washed over me, mixed with a slight unease. I shot a tentative smile in my mother-in-law's direction, but she remained focused on her cleaning, undisturbed by the compliments floating through the room. Just as I began to wonder how to navigate the tension, Daniel walked in, his voice steady. "I actually prefer Natalie's cooking," he said, glancing at his mother. "Mom's strong flavors have always made me worry about the salt. Honestly, I think Natalie should handle the cooking from now on." His words seemed to catch my mother-in-law off guard. She stood there for a moment, stunned, before quietly retreating to her room. The ripple effect of my culinary success spread quickly through the family. Relatives who had once doubted me now looked at me with newfound respect. This unexpected shift in perspective not only boosted my confidence but subtly altered the family dynamics in ways I hadn't anticipated. Soon, my reputation as a skilled chef began to grow. People started asking me to teach cooking classes, and though I was initially hesitant, I remembered the joy I had felt teaching the impromptu class during the New Year celebration. I decided to embrace the opportunity. Word spread fast, and before long, I was being asked to teach classes from all over the country. Life has a funny way of surprising you. I never expected this to be the path my life would take, but soon enough, I found myself featured in a prominent cooking magazine. In the article, I spoke about my culinary heritage and how my father had shaped my skills, feeling proud to share my story with the world. As for my mother-in-law, the woman who had once spread rumors about my cooking abilities, she stopped commenting on food altogether. The shift in family and public opinion had silenced her harsh remarks, and eventually, she stopped cooking altogether, leaving me in charge of meals in our home. Though the increase in responsibilities kept me busy, our household finally settled into a peaceful rhythm, a far cry from the tension that had once defined our interactions.